My sister exposed my bankruptcy at a family reunion, but she had no idea I secretly bought her dream vacation home for the ultimate revenge. I stood there, my drink in hand, frozen as laughter echoed around the family reunion. My sister, Lisa, grinned as she tapped her glass with a spoon, gathering everyone's attention. "I just think it's so sad," she announced, shaking her head dramatically. "My poor brother, Mark, is completely broke. Can you imagine? Filing for bankruptcy at his age? It's just tragic." The room went quiet. All eyes were suddenly on me, some filled with pity, others barely concealing their amusement. My heart pounded, my fingers tightened around my glass, but I forced a smile. I had been blindsided before, but this was a new low, even for Lisa. Lisa had always loved the spotlight, always thrived on being the center of attention. For as long as I could remember, she had taken joy in making me look small. As kids, it was harmless teasing. As adults, it was constant, subtle digs at my success, always making sure she had the upper hand. But this, announcing my supposed financial ruin in front of our entire family, that wasn't just petty. That was calculated humiliation. What Lisa didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had spent my Saturday morning making the biggest purchase of my life. I had bought a vacation home, and not just any vacation home. The exact dream house Lisa had been obsessing over for years. The one she had spent hours talking about, scrolling through pictures, imagining herself sipping wine on the porch overlooking the lake. I had seen the listing. I had seen the price drop, and I had made the deal. And now, as Lisa smirked at me, waiting for my reaction, waiting for me to crumble in front of everyone, I felt the urge to wipe that smug look off her face in the most satisfying way possible. But not yet. I let out a small chuckle, shaking my head as if I were amused. "Wow, Lisa," I said, keeping my voice light. "That's quite the announcement." "Oh, I just thought everyone should know," she said innocently, her eyes gleaming. "I mean, we're family, right? No secrets." I glanced around the room. A few of my cousins looked uncomfortable. My parents sat in awkward silence, unsure of how to react. My uncle cleared his throat, suddenly interested in his drink. It was clear. Lisa had made this moment about her, turning my supposed downfall into her latest performance. Little did she know, the biggest act was yet to come. I took a sip of my drink, forcing back a grin. The night wasn't over. Not even close. Because by the time this reunion ended, Lisa wouldn't just regret ever opening her mouth. She'd wish she had never underestimated me in the first place. I swirled my drink in my hand, watching Lisa bask in the attention like she had just performed some grand act of charity. She was eating it up, the whispered reactions, the stolen glances in my direction, the pity in some people's eyes. But beneath all of that was what she really wanted. Validation? She wanted them to see her as the one who had it all together. The successful one. The one who could afford to pity me. I let the moment settle. Let her soak in her little victory. Because the longer she believed she had won, the sweeter it would be when she realized just how wrong she was. Lisa had always been this way. Growing up, she had a way of twisting things to make herself look good while making me seem like the reckless one, the irresponsible one, the one who just couldn't get his life together. If I got a promotion, she got a better one. If I bought a car, she had to remind me that hers was more expensive. And when I started my business a few years ago, she was the first to scoff, telling me how risky it was, how people like me always ended up losing everything. She was waiting for me to fail. She wanted me to fail. And now, as she stood there with that smug expression, she thought she had finally gotten her moment. I took another sip of my drink, feeling the weight of a dozen eyes on me. Some were waiting for me to defend myself. Others were waiting for me to crumble. But I wasn't going to give Lisa the satisfaction of either. Instead, I smiled. "Well," I said, setting my drink down, "I guess there's only one thing left to do." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "And what's that?" "Enjoy the weekend," I said easily. "No point in letting bad news ruin a perfectly good reunion, right?" Lisa blinked. For the first time, she looked a little thrown off. She had expected embarrassment, maybe anger, but not this. "Wow," she said, laughing, but there was a slight hesitation in her voice. "That's surprisingly optimistic of you." I shrugged. Life goes on. She was studying me now, trying to figure out if I was putting on an act. And for the first time, I could see the tiniest crack in her confidence. Good. I turned my attention to my parents, who still looked uneasy. My mom, especially, had that worried expression she always got when she thought one of us was struggling but didn't know how to bring it up. "Mom, Dad," I said, keeping my voice light, "I know Lisa's announcement was a little unexpected. But really, it's fine. I'm fine. My dad nodded slowly. He wasn't one for gossip or drama, and I could tell he didn't like how Lisa had put me on blast in front of everyone. My mom, though, still looked concerned. Are you sure? She asked softly. I gave her a reassuring smile. Completely. Lisa's lips pressed together, like she was annoyed that I wasn't reacting the way she had hoped. Well, she said after a moment, tossing her hair over her shoulder, I just thought people deserved to know the truth. The truth. She had no idea, but she would soon. For now, I let her have her moment. The rest of the night passed with forced small talk and awkward glances in my direction. A few relatives came up to me, clearly testing the waters, trying to gauge how bad things really were. Some were genuinely concerned. Others, I could tell, were just nosy. I played it cool, kept the conversation light, because I knew something Lisa didn't. By tomorrow, everything would change. And when she finally found out what I had done, she would never forget it. The next morning, I woke up early. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden glow over the lake. The reunion was being held at our parents' cabin, a place we had all grown up visiting every summer. It was full of childhood memories, swimming in the lake, roasting marshmallows by the fire, late-night storytelling on the porch. And for Lisa, it was also a reminder of something else. Her dream. For years, Lisa had been obsessed with the idea of owning a vacation home by the water. Not just any home, but one specific house on the far end of the lake. A beautiful, modern place with huge windows, a spacious deck, and a private dock. I still remembered the way she talked about it whenever we visited. How she would stand by the shore, staring at it longingly, daydreaming about the life she could have there. She had even tried to buy it once, but the deal had fallen through. It had been too expensive at the time. She had never let go of that disappointment. And now, she was about to find out that her dream home? It belonged to me. I stepped outside, letting the crisp morning air wake me up. The reunion would continue for another day, which meant there was plenty of time for Lisa to learn the truth. I wasn't going to tell her outright. That would be too easy. No, I wanted her to figure it out on her own. I wanted her to see the listing disappear. I wanted her to ask around, to try and find out who had bought it. I wanted her to feel that spark of hope, that maybe, just maybe, she still had a chance. And then, I wanted to see her face when she realized that the person who had taken that chance away from her, the person who had quietly secured the one thing she had always wanted, was the very same brother she had just publicly humiliated. I couldn't wait. I watched the lake shimmer under the morning sun, the water still and peaceful, a stark contrast to the storm brewing beneath the surface of this family reunion. Lisa was still asleep, completely unaware that her world was about to shift in a way she'd never see coming. I had been playing this moment over and over in my head ever since I signed the final papers on Saturday morning. It wasn't about revenge in the petty sense. It wasn't about taking something from her. It was about balance, about showing her, just once, that she wasn't always the one holding all the power. But before that moment came, I wanted to enjoy the quiet. I grabbed a coffee from the kitchen and stepped onto the back porch. My parents were already up, sitting by the fire pit, their voices low and serious. I knew they were talking about me. My mother looked up as I approached, her brows furrowed with worry. "Mark, sweetheart, I just don't understand why Lisa would do something like that last night," she said, shaking her head, announcing something so personal in front of everyone. My dad let out a tired sigh. "You know Lisa," he muttered. "She likes to be the center of attention." I took a sip of my coffee, forcing a small smile. "It's fine, Mom. Really. I'm not upset." She gave me a look that said she didn't believe me. "It's just, is it true?" she asked hesitantly. "Are you struggling? You would tell us if you were, right?" I could hear the concern in her voice. She had always been the type to worry, to make sure we were okay even when we didn't ask for help. I knew she was trying to piece everything together. Lisa's announcement, my calm reaction, the fact that I hadn't denied it outright. I reached out and squeezed her hand gently. "Mom, I promise you, I'm not broke. Far from it." Her face relaxed slightly, but I could tell she still didn't understand. "Then why didn't you say something last night?" I shrugged. Because Lisa wanted a reaction. She wanted to be the one in control of the story. I wasn't going to give her that. Dad nodded approvingly. "Smart." Mom sighed, shaking her head. "I just hate that she put you in that position." "I know," I said softly. "But trust me, everything is going to work out just fine." I didn't say more. I didn't need to. Because in a matter of hours, the truth was going to unfold in a way that Lisa would never forget. Later that morning, as the rest of the family started waking up and gathering for breakfast. I caught Lisa scrolling through her phone, a frown slowly forming on her face. Bingo. She had found out. The lake house listing was gone. I watched as she tapped furiously on her screen, searching, trying to figure out what had happened. My heart pounded as I waited, letting her spiral just a little longer. Then she turned to me. Mark. I looked up casually. Yeah. She hesitated, like she wasn't sure how to phrase what she wanted to say. Did you hear anything about the lake house? The one down at the end of the cove? I raised an eyebrow. What about it? She inhaled sharply, clearly frustrated. It's gone. The listing is gone. It was still up on Friday. I fought the urge to smile. Weird, I said simply, sipping my coffee. Lisa narrowed her eyes, suspicion creeping into her expression. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? I tilted my head slightly, acting as if I was giving it some thought. Well, now that you mention it. Her whole body tensed. What? I leaned back in my chair, letting the moment hang between us. I might have bought it. The color drained from her face. She blinked. Once. Twice. As if she couldn't quite process what I had just said. You? What? I smiled. I bought it. The room around us seemed to quiet as a few nearby relatives caught on to the conversation. My mom, sitting across the table, looked just as surprised. My dad, though, looked amused, like he had already put the pieces together. Lisa shook her head, laughing in disbelief. No, you're joking. I'm not. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked away, gripping her phone tightly. I could see it happening in real time, the realization setting in. The dream she had clung to for years had just slipped through her fingers, and worse, it had landed right in mine. You're broke, she blurted out, almost like she was trying to convince herself. You filed for bankruptcy. I smiled. Did I? Her hands clenched into fists. Then what the hell was last night about? You tell me, I said smoothly. You're the one who made the announcement. Her jaw tightened. You let me embarrass you. I shrugged. I didn't let you do anything. You made your choice. She was breathing hard now, trying to hold it together, but I could see the cracks forming. Lisa wasn't used to losing, and she especially wasn't used to losing to me. Then, just like that, she stormed off. I exhaled slowly, my hands tightening around my coffee cup. I should have felt victorious, but instead, something else settled in my chest, something heavier. Lisa wasn't just angry. She was hurt, and for the first time, I wondered if this had gone too far. Lisa's footsteps faded as she stormed off, but the tension she left behind still crackled in the air. The table had gone quiet, all eyes darting between me and the direction she had just disappeared. Some of my relatives looked intrigued, others uncomfortable, but no one dared to say anything. My mom, however, was the first to break the silence. Mark, she said carefully, leaning forward, is this true? Did you really buy the lake house? I nodded. Yeah, Mom, I did. She blinked, as if still trying to process what that meant. My dad let out a low chuckle, shaking his head like he had just watched the most unexpected twist in a movie. Well, he said, sipping his coffee, that's one hell of a turn of events. A few of my cousins exchanged glances, clearly enjoying the drama, but my mom wasn't smiling. Her gaze flickered toward the hallway Lisa had disappeared down, worry etched into her features. You know how much she wanted that house, she murmured. I sighed, running a hand over my face. I know. And you still bought it? I hesitated. It wasn't an easy question to answer, because the truth was, I hadn't bought it just to take it from her. Sure, the timing was poetic, given how she had humiliated me the night before, but that wasn't the reason. I had been looking for a vacation home for a while now, and when I saw the listing, I knew it was the right investment. The fact that it was Lisa's dream house? That was just an ironic twist of fate. Before I could explain, Lisa came marching back into the room, her face red with fury. She had her phone gripped tightly in her hand, her knuckles white. You're lying, she snapped, her voice trembling. You're messing with me. I met her gaze evenly. I'm not. She shook her head. No. No way. You don't just go from bankruptcy to buying a lake house. That doesn't make sense. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. Who said I was ever bankrupt? Her mouth opened, but no words came out. I could see her trying to process everything, trying to backtrack and piece together what she thought she knew. But, she stammered, her voice cracking. Everyone said, you said. I corrected, my voice calm but firm. You stood up last night and announced to the whole family that I was broke. You didn't ask me. You didn't verify anything. You just assumed. She was breathing heavily now, her hands shaking. I just thought. I tilted my head. You thought what, Lisa? That I had failed? That I was beneath you? That you finally had something over me? Her silence was answer enough. I exhaled, my voice softer now. Lisa, I didn't buy that house to hurt you. Her eyes darted to mine, filled with disbelief. Then why? I hesitated. Because I could. Because I had worked hard for it. Because for once, I didn't want to be the one looking up at her, always playing catch-up while she stood in the spotlight. Instead of saying any of that, I simply said, because I wanted it. Lisa let out a hollow laugh, shaking her head. Unbelievable. She turned and walked toward the door, grabbing her coat from the back of a chair. Where are you going? Mom asked, standing up. Lisa didn't look back. Anywhere but here. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving a thick, suffocating silence in her wake. The door slammed so hard that the sound echoed through the cabin, leaving the rest of us in a tense, awkward silence. My mother was still standing, her hand hovering near her chest like she wanted to run after Lisa but wasn't sure if she should. My father just shook his head, rubbing his temples. Well, he muttered, that could have gone better. I let out a slow breath, trying to push down the tight feeling in my chest. I hadn't expected her to take it well, but watching her walk out like that, so furious, so shaken, left me with a strange mix of satisfaction and guilt. I had spent years being the one who got overshadowed. Lisa always had to be the one on top, the one who had everything figured out. The moment she thought I had failed, she wasted no time in making sure the entire family knew. But now, she was the one stumbling. I stood up, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on me. I should go talk to her. Mom looked relieved, but Dad just smirked. You sure that's a good idea? No, I admitted. But I don't think letting her stew in it is a good idea either. I stepped outside, the crisp morning air hitting me as I scanned the driveway. Lisa's car was still there, but she wasn't inside. I turned my head toward the lake, and sure enough, I spotted her standing near the dock, arms wrapped tightly around herself. She didn't turn when she heard my footsteps. She just stared at the water, her shoulders stiff. For a moment, I just stood there beside her, letting the quiet settle between us. I didn't do this to hurt you, I said finally. She let out a dry laugh. Sure feels like you did. I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck. Lisa, do you even hear yourself? You humiliated me in front of the whole family last night without knowing a single fact. And now, you're acting like I'm the villain because I bought a house you wanted. She turned her head, her expression unreadable. You should have told me. I frowned. Told you what? That you were looking at it, she snapped, eyes flashing. That you were even thinking about buying it. I scoffed. Oh, right. Like you told me before announcing to the entire family that I was broke? Her jaw clenched. That was a mistake. Yeah, I said quietly it was. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Her arms loosened around herself, and she exhaled shakily. I thought I had time. I studied her, confused. What do you mean? Lisa hesitated, then looked away. I was going to put in an offer next month. I was waiting for a bonus at work. I had it all planned out. A knot formed in my stomach. I had known she loved that house, but I hadn't realized how close she had been to actually buying it. I didn't know, I admitted. The listing price dropped, and I moved on it fast. She shook her head, laughing bitterly. Of course you did. And now, you get to watch me fall apart. That's not what this is, I said firmly. Lisa, you've spent our whole lives making sure I always came second. This wasn't about you. This was about me finally doing something for myself without worrying about what you'd think. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, barely above a whisper, she asked, Are you going to keep it? I blinked. What? The house, she said, her voice tight. Are you going to live in it? I frowned, not understanding the weight of the question. I mean, I was planning on using it as a vacation home. Her expression faltered, and I realized something. She wasn't just angry. She was heartbroken. She wasn't mad that I had bought the house. She was mad because it meant she never would. And that's when she dropped the real bombshell. I was going to propose to Daniel there, she whispered. Everything inside me stilled. Daniel, her boyfriend of 4 years. The guy she had been with through everything. The guy who, if I was being honest, I thought she'd marry ages ago. You were? I asked carefully. She nodded, biting her lip. I had this whole plan. We'd spend the weekend there. I was going to surprise him. I even had a ring picked out. For a long moment, I didn't know what to say. I had spent the last 24 hours thinking this was about her pride. about her need to be the one on top. But now, standing here, I realized it was so much bigger than that. She had built her future around that house. She had seen it as more than just a vacation spot. It was supposed to be her fresh start, and I had taken that from her without even knowing. Lisa stood there, staring at the lake, her arms still wrapped tightly around herself. The anger in her eyes had faded, replaced with something much heavier. She wasn't just furious with me. She was grieving the future she thought she had planned. I ran a hand through my hair, exhaling. Lisa, I didn't know. She let out a short, humorless laugh. Of course, you didn't. Why would you? For the first time, I saw it. The exhaustion. The weight she had been carrying. Lisa had always been the confident one, the sister who had everything under control. But now, in this moment, she looked small, lost. I wasn't used to seeing her like this. She swallowed hard and shook her head. I thought that house was mine. Not officially, but in my head, it already was. I had everything mapped out. The weekend, the proposal, the future. Her voice cracked slightly, but she recovered quickly. And now it's gone. I wanted to tell her that it was just a house, that she could find another one, but I knew that wasn't what she needed to hear. To her, this wasn't just about real estate. It was about everything she had worked toward slipping through her fingers. Lisa rarely let people see her vulnerable, but standing there, in the cold morning air, she was unraveling. I sighed, leaning against the wooden railing. Look, I don't want to be the reason you're upset. She let out a shaky breath. Well, congratulations. You are. I hesitated before speaking again. Why didn't you just tell me? About the house, about Daniel, about any of it? Her jaw clenched. Because I didn't think I had to. Because I never thought you'd be the one to take it. Those words hit me harder than I expected. Not because they were cruel, but because they were honest. Lisa had spent years assuming she was the one ahead. That I'd never make a move before she did. That I would always be in her shadow. And now, for the first time, the roles had shifted, and she didn't know how to handle it. She let out a bitter laugh. You know the worst part? When I saw the listing was gone, I still thought I had a chance. I figured maybe Daniel had bought it for me as a surprise. She shook her head. Turns out, the surprise was you. Something about the way she said that didn't sit right. I frowned. Wait, Daniel knew? She hesitated just a little too long before answering. Yeah, I mean, kind of. A strange feeling settled in my gut. Something wasn't adding up. Lisa, I said slowly, did Daniel know you were planning to propose? Her silence told me everything I needed to know. I exhaled. Lisa, have you even talked to him about marriage? She finally turned to face me, her expression guarded. We've talked about the future. That's not what I asked. She looked away. I felt my stomach drop. Lisa, does Daniel even want to get married? She didn't answer. That was the moment it hit me. The real twist. The thing Lisa had been trying so hard not to admit. Not just to me, but to herself. This wasn't about the house. This wasn't about me buying it first. This was about her trying to hold on to something that was already slipping away. Lisa had convinced herself that the house would fix everything. That if she just made the proposal perfect, Daniel would say yes. That if she controlled the moment, she could control the outcome. But deep down, she already knew the truth. She was losing him. I could see it in her face now, in the way her shoulders slumped, the way her lips pressed together like she was trying to stop the truth from spilling out. I let out a slow breath. Lisa, is that why you were so mad? Her jaw tightened. I don't want to talk about this, but she didn't have to. I already knew. The lake house wasn't the real dream. It was the last desperate attempt to hold on to one. Lisa had always been the one in control. But now, for the first time, she was facing something she couldn't manipulate or plan her way out of. And that terrified her. I took a step closer, lowering my voice. Lisa, if you need someone to talk to. She cut me off. I'm fine. She wasn't. But I knew better than to push. So instead, I just nodded. Okay. She turned back toward the lake, exhaling slowly. I need a minute. I nodded again, giving her space as I walked back toward the cabin. The house wasn't the real loss. And deep down, Lisa knew it. But she wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. And I wasn't going to be the one to force her. I didn't say anything else as I walked away, leaving Lisa alone with her thoughts. The wind had picked up slightly, rippling across the lake, making the water look restless, just like her. I could feel her gaze on my back, but she didn't call after me. She wasn't ready. Back inside the cabin, the atmosphere was still thick with tension. My mother looked at me expectantly, searching my face for any sign of how things had gone. I just gave a small shake of my head, and she sighed, pressing her lips together. Dad, on the other hand, looked unfazed. He was stirring his coffee like he hadn't just watched his children have a near-explosive argument in front of the entire family. She'll come around, he muttered. I wasn't so sure. Lisa had always been stubborn, but this was different. This wasn't just about pride or competition. This was something deeper. I sat down at the table, picking at the plate of food I had abandoned earlier. A few cousins were still lingering nearby, pretending not to listen while stealing glances in my direction. I ignored them. Mom finally spoke. She's really hurting, Mark. I set my fork down. I know. She hesitated, then asked, did she say anything about Daniel? That caught me off guard. I looked up at her, and she gave me a knowing look. She told me a few weeks ago she was thinking about proposing, Mom said quietly, but something felt off. I didn't press her, but I could tell she was nervous. Like she wasn't sure what his answer would be. I exhaled, rubbing my forehead. She wasn't sure because she already knows. Mom's shoulders sagged. Oh, that one word carried so much weight. She understood. She had always known Lisa better than anyone. Dad finally spoke up, his voice gruff. Then this isn't about the damn house. No, I admitted. It's not. Lisa had latched onto the house because it was something tangible, something she could control. But Daniel? That was different. That was something slipping through her fingers no matter how tightly she held on. And now, she was left with nothing but the realization that all her careful planning hadn't changed a thing. Mom sighed, shaking her head. She's always been like this. Whenever something feels unstable, she throws herself into something else. A project, a goal. Anything that makes her feel like she's still in charge. I nodded. And this time, it was the house. Silence stretched between us. I could hear distant laughter from a group of younger cousins playing outside. The world was still moving forward, oblivious to the unraveling happening within our family. Then the front door creaked open. Lisa walked in, her face carefully composed, but her eyes slightly red. She had pulled herself together, but I knew she was still raw underneath. She didn't look at me as she walked past, heading straight for the coffee pot. The room stayed quiet, everyone watching, waiting to see if she would say something. Finally, she spoke, her voice even. I'm not mad about the house. I glanced at Mom, then back at Lisa. I know. She poured herself a cup of coffee, staring down at the dark liquid for a long moment. She inhaled sharply, then let it out. I just thought it would fix things. I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't need to. For Lisa, the lake house had been more than a dream home. It had been the place where she thought everything would finally fall into place, where she could create the perfect life she had imagined for herself and Daniel. But no house, no plan, no grand gesture could change the truth. She finally turned to face me, her expression unreadable. So what now? It was a simple question, but I knew it meant more than just a house. For the first time in years, Lisa didn't have all the answers. And for the first time, she was willing to admit it. Lisa stood there, her coffee cup cradled between her hands, waiting for an answer. But I didn't have one. Not really. The question she had asked, so what now? Wasn't about the house or even about us. It was about everything. About what came next when the things we thought we were certain of turned out to be nothing more than illusions. I took a slow breath, choosing my words carefully. I don't know, Lisa, but maybe that's okay. Her lips pressed into a thin line, like she wanted to argue, to push back. But for once, she didn't. She just nodded, staring down into her coffee as if the answer might be hidden in the swirling liquid. The silence between us wasn't hostile anymore. It wasn't tense or sharp. It was just quiet. Dad stood up, stretching, and muttered, Well, I don't know about you two, but I could use some air. He patted Mom on the shoulder, then gave Lisa and me a knowing look before stepping outside. Mom lingered for a moment, her expression full of that motherly concern she always had when she saw one of us struggling. Lisa, she said gently, you don't have to figure it all out right this second. Lisa swallowed hard but nodded. Mom gave her arm a soft squeeze before following Dad out the door, leaving just the two of us in the kitchen. Lisa finally broke the silence. I don't even know why I'm upset anymore. I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. Maybe because everything feels like it's changing, and you don't know how to stop it. She gave a hollow laugh. Yeah, maybe. She exhaled slowly. I thought if I had the house, if I planned everything just right, then Daniel and I would. She trailed off, shaking her head. I don't even know what I was thinking. You can't force someone to want something they don't. I didn't say anything because there was nothing to say. She already knew the truth. She rubbed her temples, frustrated. I spent so much time building a future in my head, and I never stopped to think about whether it was actually real. She glanced up at me. And maybe I was so caught up in that I never realized I was pushing you down in the process. That admission surprised me. Lisa wasn't the type to reflect on her own actions. But here she was, standing in front of me, acknowledging something I had felt for years but never said out loud. I let out a slow breath. I don't need an apology, Lisa. I just need you to understand that I was never trying to compete with you. She nodded, her gaze softening. I know. And maybe I wasn't trying to compete either. Maybe I was just scared of falling behind. That was the most honest thing she had said all day. For years, I had seen Lisa as the one who had it all together, the one who always won, who always knew exactly what she wanted. But maybe that was never the full picture. Maybe she had been just as lost as I had been, just in a different way. She took a sip of her coffee, then set the cup down. So, what are you going to do with the house? I smirked. Live in it. She rolled her eyes. I meant long term. I shrugged. I don't know yet. But for now, I'm keeping it. She nodded, looking like she was still trying to accept that reality. You know, it's funny. I spent years picturing myself in that house. But now that I know I won't have it, I can't even imagine what I would have done next. I raised an eyebrow. You would have figured it out. She smiled faintly. Yeah, I guess I still will. That was the moment I knew she was going to be okay. Maybe not right away. Maybe not even in the next few weeks. But eventually, she would. Because despite everything, Lisa wasn't the type to stay broken for long. We spent the rest of the morning in a kind of unspoken truce. No sharp remarks, no lingering tension. Just two siblings sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee in the quiet. By afternoon, the family reunion started winding down. People packed up their things, said their goodbyes. Mom hugged me a little tighter than usual, and Dad gave me a solid pat on the back, which, in his way, was basically the same as an "I'm proud of you." Lisa and I stood by the driveway as she loaded her bag into her car. She hesitated before getting in, glancing at me. Hey, she said, maybe next time you go to the house, you'll let me see it? I nodded. Yeah, anytime. She smiled. Okay. And with that, she got in and drove off, leaving behind something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not the kind that came from winning or proving a point, but the kind that came from finally understanding someone you thought you never could. As I watched her car disappear down the road, I realized something. Maybe this wasn't just about the house. Maybe this was about both of us learning how to let go.